well, happy Friday, everybody, and welcome into day 2 of week 4 of the PPC. My name is Dolson. Fawn is with me for our first matchup of the day. And Fawn, we're starting off over in Europe, one of the more contested regions we have.
Yeah, the first match, of course, it is that we'll be looking at is mixalazeub versus ChromaSpace.
Right?
ChromaSpace, one of those old-time favorites throughout this season, or I should say, really throughout this phase, that we've seen time and time again fight back against mixalazeub. I mean, I believe last time it was that we ended up seeing them, they didn't end up taking the win over mixalazeub. So
Right.
this will be interesting to see if they've managed to sort of adapt their strategy to see if they can fight back against the previous mixalazeub that ended up beating them last time around. ChromaSpace have a lot of their work cut out for them, and I'm glad you mentioned that it is the most contested region because that's very true. We've seen back and forth so many times in the EU bracket.
And right, I mean, it's what, phase 1 of the PPC, it's like D69 against the world. They're running
Right.
away with everything. Everyone else is chasing them. Now you're kind of contested top to bottom between mixalazeub and ChromaSpace here. Both of these teams towards the bottom of the standings, 1 and 2 respectively for both of them. So this is a good chance for them to kind of leap themselves up, move yourself up the standing, get yourself some momentum in a region that is going to be very back and forth. I mean, you look towards some other regions, still teams at the bottom, haven't won games yet, haven't won maps yet. So this is an area where these teams can take some confidence and move themselves forward. So it should be a fun one here. mixalazeub versus ChromaSpace. Bright Marsh, fun. Map number 1 is going to be a lot of fun to jump into. Worth mentioning the map bans, I think, here. mixalazeub take Bazaar and Warder's Gate off the table, and ChromaSpace will take Shattered Desert and Ice Mine. So interesting ban there on the Ice Mines.
Yeah, and even more so interesting that mixalazeub want to take ChromaSpace to Brightmarsh. I mean, that's their
Right?
map. That's a map they love to go back to time and time again. So hopefully mixalazeub will know exactly what they're doing on this map as opposed to ChromaSpace, who love this map to death.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're putting the ball in your court against them. You're putting them on their own home court. You're choosing home field advantage for the enemy team almost. But hey, maybe there's some strategy to it here. Picks and bans for game number 1 here in this first set of the day. We got 4 of them today, 4 sets today. So make sure to stay tuned all day for some great PPC action. Victor taken off the board. Genos follows as well. We're starting to see a little bit more of this, though, Fawn. The Genos so powerful. Lots of teams either kind of putting him into that first pick slot or banning him out first overall. So no surprises here. Maybe Ruckus, though, is a little bit surprising, though popular over in Europe.
Well, I mean, at the same time, though, I mean, we do see that ROM be banned as well. I mean, it's the sort of aggression that these teams don't want to deal with. They don't want to deal with the dive
Right.
potential that both ROM and Ruckus bring to the table. And you are right, Genos is somebody that we've been seeing picked a lot more consistently, especially when paired against Corvus, or if they're even on the same team. We've seen the double pocket happen before too. So it is really, really interesting to see that Genos is in the ban column and not Corvus. They feel like that Ruckus is something they want to deal with a little bit more. So we'll have to see who's going to end up locking in that Corvus, if they even do. We've seen him unpicked, unbanned before as well.
Well, mixalazeub are going to forego Corvus entirely. I mean, they only had one chance to do it. They're going to lock in the Androxus instead. I noted kind of a distinct lack of Androxus yesterday. You know, a handful of games here and there absolutely was played. But I'm more used to seeing Androxus basically in every team comp in some place, every game effectively at that point. So mixalazeub realizing some strength there. Going to lock in some good direct damage, great mobility to start off their draft. A Grover and an Ashe, though, we started to see this rise of Ashe Fawn, and the off tank is really starting to take control of some games.
I think it's really just the aggression that Ashe brings to the table. Sure, the Rezo changes means her assert dominance isn't going to stun as long, but that's not why you're taking Ashe. You're taking Ashe for her survivability. The space it is that she creates off of assert dominance. That's really, really strong. That's why people want to lock in Ashe despite the Rezo changes. But a Strix is what's interesting here on the side of ChromaSpace. I mean, that's not really a pick it is that we've seen as often anymore. You even got the ROM. So ChromaSpace, there's no Corvus being picked on the side of them. They rather have that sustainability in the form of the Grover. They want the aggression. They want the backline dive, and that's what both Ashe and ROM bring to the table.
And you know, and maybe this is kind of the wrong thing to latch on to, and I don't know maybe how concerned you are here as Nara and Atlas are locked in for mixalazeub. You look at a Strix who wants to hang a little bit further back, pop down some good damage, and then an Ashe and a ROM that want to run at you, run forward. Are you at all concerned? And maybe this will change with ChromaSpace's final pick here, that there's a bit of a disjoint between the one, now Zen gets locked in, maybe bridges that gap a little bit, the Strix, the Ashe, the Rom, maybe two different playstyles.
I think in this scenario, I do understand where the concern could come in because, like you said, it's a backliner and you have the rest of your team already diving forward, right? And Grover's going to be with them too. That's where he wants to be at. He wants to be
Right.
around people so he can make sure he has that AoE healing. Whirlwind's going to be extremely effective too. But at the same time, I would just say that when you have Strix on your team and you have everyone else to complement the backline dive that they are providing, I don't think it really matters if he's going to sit in the back because everyone's going to be too busy looking at Ashe or Rom
Right.
or Zen and everybody else. So they're going to have to deal with them first. They have to. They can't ignore them. They're too much of a priority pick nowadays. So they're going to have to deal with them. And the Strix is probably just going to sit back there pretty unless they end up picking them off quick enough.
Yeah, maybe it's literally the exact opposite of concern. Maybe you're happy if everyone is staring at Rom and Ashe and Strix can just sit back and do what he wants to do. Time and time again. Game number 1, mixalazeub versus ChromaSpace. Again, this is a favorite of ChromaSpace, so interesting. Maybe that mixalazeub will take us here. Cassie locked in, and I think a good point to be made there, Fawn. We started to see this rise of Cassie as well. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, over in Brazil, she was hovering a 70+% win rate. So strong and melting down these health bars, and she's got the ability to do it here with a Rom and an Ashe on the enemy team.
I mean, even with the nerfs to big game that we saw at the very beginning of Season 3, it never meant that Cassie wasn't still a good pick. I mean, you really want to be able to melt down Ashe or Rom or a lot of those targets that have high health pools. So Cassie's definitely the character to do it, especially since we've seen so much Ruckus as well. One of Ruckus's biggest counters is Cassie.
That's right, and Davizzy here on this Atlas is going to have his hands full. I mean, Pecha is going to want to obviously sustain up on that point, but double off tank for ChromaSpace is going to be difficult for Atlas to keep up with. It's going to be Grover, though, finding first blood, immediately answered back by BK there. Ovim, Nepo both find a couple of kills here. So far up is the Strix. The gates were kind of overrun there by ChromaSpace. And the point control back over to Red.
Yeah, and I feel like that's just what this composition brings to the table on the side of ChromaSpace. I mean, you had Ashe being looked at by Cassie the entire time, and sure, she ended up going down, but they already got the kills before then. They killed off Princess Pekka. Their point tank was gone, and Atlas was already on the retreat. They were plugging in damage where they needed to, and here's Ashe once again by the apartments to just draw attention. Tooth
and nail for point number 1. Nepo back from respawn is going to get the kill on the Davizzy. Rolling back now is the Cassie, rolling aggressively forward. Final shots into Ovim. That's going to charge up the Scout and maybe gives ChromaSpace a small advantage here, and it does exactly that, or mixalazeub rather, wanted the Scout on their side. Coriel is going to get the kill onto the Cassie to seal the deal here. Quick pause. It's ChromaSpace grab point number 1.
Yeah, and I really think it comes down to the attention it is that Coriel is drawing to himself. Like the fact that ChromaSpace have so much at their disposal with this aggression, it means that mixalazeub don't really have a time to react to certain things. They end up picking up the Atlas because they wanted to be able to try and cancel that shoulder bash. They wanted to be able to cancel Rom run and deal with that. That's the entire point as to why they locked in that Atlas, as well as make it a little bit more uncomfortable with the divider to try and make sure Strix is just shooting into nothing, but they're forcing out the divider. Everyone else is looking at so many different people because you have Zen in the back line, you have Ashe, you have Rom, you even have Grover moving up. We saw Nepo moving up too. So there's a lot that they have to keep in mind, and they don't really have the time to use Atlas to counter how they were expecting him to.
Right, and kind of the balance, I think, with the Strix definitely came out to play as well. The long-range damage setting up for the dive from the rest of the team paid off in dividends there for ChromaSpace. Back in we go. A chance for mixalazeub to slow down this offensive push, and now he needs to hit the gas, and he sure does. Zadium will go down, flashbang down, looking for the shot. Nepo's found one, down around to the corner though. That's a big chance. Ovim, Nepo, each adding a couple of kills to that kill column. A nice setback and a good divider from Davizzy, but not enough to stop Ovim. Cart continues to roll itself forward under the aggression of ChromaSpace.
Here they are just sitting inside that little, I guess the other like mini apartment area that's there as well. I mean, Rom's just waiting to see if anyone drops down. Same thing for really anyone else on the side of ChromaSpace. The cart's rolling right on in. They can't create the space they wanted to, but Rom already looks like he's pretty low.
Pretty divided here. Davizzy on one side, Pecha on the other. Ovim melted down and through. It's going to be the Dread Serpent into the right-hand side of the map here. Cursed Arm down from the high ground is going to force Grover to find his way back defensively. And now you can see the aggression from mixalazeub rolling their way forward at a base. For the moment, they've stalled out ChromaSpace.
Owen was already pretty low when he was by the apartments. He was sitting in there for a while. He tried to make sure he could get out. He got rewound by Atlas, which is exactly that utility that Atlas has available to him. And so it just made it harder for them to try and hold on to that. He was already taking damage before the rest of his team even had crested around that corner. He was just waiting there seeing if he could hold anything, but he was up a little bit for too long, and they just took advantage of that.
Well, one more push maybe in the cards here for ChromaSpace. They've got a few big ultimates ready to go between Rom. Flashbang, you know, could maybe open a door, locks down a target, but the assert dominance, I think, is where you got to keep your eyes here. ChromaSpace, if they want to use that one aggressively, can really set up kind of a snowball out through the rest of this one. Ovum taken low again. We saw what happened last time when Ovum just got too heavily poked out, but look at this. Kiesel the first to go down. Davazy will fall down as well. The Pecha now up onto the wall. I don't think got quite the value he was looking for there. 5 seconds left. Deaths are staggered out here. Nobody from mixalazeub is going to make the attempt. ChromaSpace with the brute force push. Go up 2-0.
Yeah, they found that beginning pick as they were cresting around that corner, making sure they could roll the cart to make sure they could cement that second point. And once they got that, they just fired on all cylinders. They didn't even need to use any of their ultimates. They just capitalized on a single pick, and the rest of mixalazeub couldn't really do much about that, considering the rest of them were by their spawn. They would have had to drop down in positions that would have been awful for them to be looked at by different people on ChromaSpace, and there was no contesting after Inara was gone.
I think Nauk has done a good job, really, for mixalazeub as well on the other side. The Androxus has hit that stride somewhat well, I think, early on in this game, but needs some support from the rest of the squad. 3-1-1 right now for the Andro and top damage in the game, so that's what we expect here. Remember, ChromaSpace is able to kind of balance that aggressive playback kind of duality play style last time, and they're going to be doing more of that here. Nepo's going to move his way over to the left. Now he's going to punch some shots down, but right into the snipe. Down goes Androxus. A perfect start for ChromaSpace here, but Ovum, heavily poked out, is going to have to back himself up.
Decided to crash a little bit too late as well. I mean, she was using that to see if she could try and peel for her teammate, but of course it didn't work out that way. And you use the you use the Cataclysm as well, and it's not finding anything. Right. They're even being more aggressive now than before.
And they're gonna jump up and over. That was the whirlwind used, and now a Dread Serpent out into triple kill for Nepo down the stretch. Princess Pecha, the last left alive here. It's a quad, a soft 4 for Nepo, and ChromaSpace take over the mid.
Big oof is how I analyze that situation right there. I mean, they just ended up getting pretty much surrounded in that little area right there by so many different people on the side of ChromaSpace. They pretty much funneled them into one single location. You had the assert dominance to make sure that they hunkered down on that specific spot, and they ended up paying off a lot for them, and everyone else ended up getting dismounted. I don't even know if anyone's going to be able to really touch on ChromaSpace, but they at least were able to trade out 1 for 1.
That's right, damage dealer for damage dealer, so points contest relatively even here up to this point, but not having Nepo. Big loss for ChromaSpace. Davazy goes down though as well. Pecha now being looked at by a few members of ChromaSpace, still being sustained up quite well by Kiesel here, but it's a dash away from Nauk to stay alive. Up onto the high ground he goes with the stealth. Around the corner goes Nepo, quick scope. Not gonna miss from that range. Cassie does hit a good shot here, but the numbers definitely advantage of ChromaSpace. And Vaughn, you kind of rewind back there to where ChromaSpace took control of that mid. I can't imagine many team comps I want to fight against less in small corridors than a whirlwind, an assert dominance, a cataclysm, a flashbang. I mean, literally everything from ChromaSpace is going to punish you for playing that close together.
Yeah, and of course, when mixalazeub even had a brief moment of control onto the point when they were garnering percentage for themselves, what did ChromaSpace do? They grouped up, exactly what you were talking about. You were talking about how they had like a lot of these close quarters areas that we have on Bright Marsh, but it just doesn't end up paying off against ChromaSpace when you have the composition like they have. They all grouped up on point. They made sure they focused down on whoever was there. Of course, they had to answer Davazy in the back on the Atlas, but once he was dead, everyone else just funneled directly on the point. They killed that Inara, and they got rid of her soon after.
And Vaughn, they're doing a lot of that again here. ChromaSpace are. They staggered out Davazy pretty heavily here. So 4v5 just for a second. Davazy now back and respawning, but a minute and 20 seconds left. You have to defend now as the high ground already overrun. Coriel attempting to use the assert dominance won't connect. The Dread Serpent thrown out as well for mixalazeub to push back ChromaSpace, and it's doing just that. And a cursed arm, but Nepo jumps over the wall, hits the shot on a Nauk, and will make his way back into the mid-fight. So for the moment, mixalazeub have weathered this storm. But Fawn, they had to use a lot there. A Dread Serpent and a Cursed Arm, a Scout a moment ago. And look at this, the counter punch from ChromaSpace. They're going to re-engage. It's the flashbang thrown out. Pecha, I'm not sure, going to be able to stay alive. Seismic crash down off to the side, but Adium avoids the stun and the damage. Nepo's still alive, but Pecha has something else to say about it. Down goes the Inara. Cart continuing to roll forward as Davazy back from the respawn.
Yeah, Ovum hit the gas towards the tail end of that engagement as well, and they end up just losing the game. That just came down to being surgical. That came down to being clinical. ChromaSpace knew what they wanted their composition to do, and they capitalized on that in full. The minute that Ovum ran right in, they already got a pick on the side by Apartments. Once again, I was just about to mention, I was like, man, ChromaSpace, they're waiting on that right side a lot by the Apartments a lot. They keep getting picked off. First it was Rom, then it was Ash. But even though Ash went down, they still held their ground by the Apartments. They didn't gain that much space on the side of mixalazeub. So Rom, aka Ovum, just ran right back in. The minute he did, they capitalized on that, tossed out the flashbang, and that was just it.
Yeah, there's just so much defensive utility used, right, to try to keep that cart from going in. So not surprising when we see the tides kind of shift the way they did there, is that counter punch right around the end that ended up paying off. We'll get a look at the post-game stats here. ChromaSpace, remember, we were surprised that mixalazeub took us to Bright Marsh, but ChromaSpace very happily going to go there. Now they'll get a map pick of their own as well. I think this Strix paid off so well, and then Adium as well. I kind of talked about that bridge the gap between the two ranges. I think a good mix there gave ChromaSpace a good edge.
You mentioned Nauk beforehand on the Androxus end. I mean, we see his damage numbers really playing a huge role into what was really centered around mixalazeub's composition. I mean, they had the Cassie as well. They had 70k. They had more than Strix did by only really 1,000, maybe even 500. But at the end of the day, Nauk was the one that really took that damage lead and capitalized on it. He made sure that he was opening up whatever he could whenever he was flanking. Any space that was being closed up by ChromaSpace, he tried to make sure that he got the picks. Whenever that he had a Cursor Arm, he utilized it to make sure that they couldn't group up, because he knew that's what their composition wanted to do. So he was able to pretty much spread out a lot of damage in between ChromaSpace, not only off of his ultimate, but just off of how well he was positioning as well.
And I look at those post-game stats. You killed Adium and Nepo combined 6 times throughout that game. Adium on the Zen only dies once. Nepo goes down a few times, and we saw how aggressive that Strix was. I mean, it was just overwhelming from ChromaSpace, who now carry that 1-0 lead into our next matchup. So I think for mixalazeub here, maybe getting creative with the way you're starting off as far as the map choice that you go to for map number 1. But now it's time to really buckle down. And we know that mixalazeub can do that. But in these shorter best-of-5 sets, you get this snowball going, and sometimes it is very difficult to stop here. So Jag Falls is what we're looking at for map number 2, Fawn. Pretty fun. A lot of interesting picks there. One of the guys, Stop Banning BK, is his in-game name.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a champ we see here on Jag Falls.
Yeah, maybe it is. I mean, we've seen a lot of these blasters end up getting picked a lot of different times, right? I mean, that's if mixalazeub, of course, want to end up listening to, not mixalazeub, but ChromaSpace, if they want to listen to the man's name and stop actually banning BK, right? But he wasn't banned last go around. Maybe he could have got picked last time. I mean, maybe they could have just picked him on Bright Marsh, but regardless of whether they want to pick him or not, these are 2 close quarters maps back to back, and Chroma have shown that they like to play on these types of maps. And of course, they start things off with the Vivian ban, which is, I mean, you can't really be too surprised at that.
No, absolutely not. A Vivian left unchecked is usually death for the team playing against it. So not surprised there. Atlas maybe a little bit surprising, Fawn. We've seen the rise of these off tanks as well. A double off tank attempt with the Rom and the Ash just previously. The Atlas, though, I don't know if it made enough noise for mixalazeub to really warrant a ban here, but what do you think? Does Atlas maybe belong in that ban column sometimes? Does he work here well enough on Jaguar Falls?
I definitely think he does. I mean, regardless of whether you choose the talent with his divider being like the size of Jaguar Falls or not,
the entire map.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, you still got to get rid of him. You still got to respect him because he is still a strong character. I think that they just ended up being out drafted last time around with the Atlas. They had too many people he had to look at, even though he got the AOE setback. it didn't really matter. Like it just wasn't really providing what they needed in that instance. But that doesn't mean he's not a strong character. It just means that the draft that they had
Right.
on the side of ChromaSpace was just better overall. So they don't want to deal with him, which makes complete sense. But they at least get one of the pocket picks, and actually both of them are open. They got Genos, but we'll have to see what they go for this time around.
Yeah, and Fawn, remember, Corvus overlooked in game one, not picked or banned, and barring a double healer comp from one of these two teams is going to get overlooked yet again. It is triple off-tank bans between Atlas, Rom, and the Ashe here. Ruckus, though, is going to make his way through, paired up with that Damba. Good healing numbers out of the Damba. I mean, all things considered, and though resilience is a little cheaper now, maybe a little bit more value out of that item. The Dread Serpent, I still think, has that ability to change around some of these team fights. So how surprised are you really that we're seeing Damba valued over the Corvus?
Not really. I'm not really surprised much at all because we've seen Damba be picked multiple times, like throughout the PPC and throughout this phase, really. He has a lot of sustained healing. He has a lot of sustainability in the side that he can throw out his gourd and he can focus on healing other people that the gourd's not healing, right? Or he can just make sure that he pockets one specific person. So that ability to spread out his heal, I think, is what's more so important because that's what both Genos and Corvus could do. And sometimes most of the time people consider that they can do it better, but Maldama can do the same thing, which is why they're locking in that Dama for more of that sustainability, even though Dread Serpent gets countered out extremely hard by that resilience.
So I jokingly, admittedly hinted at potential double healer comp here, but it is anything but a joke for ChromaSpace. Genos locked in, as well as the Grover a little bit later on. Victor makes his way not only through the ban phase, but through the first 8 picks of the game. That is a 9th pick overall Victor later on here on Jaguar Falls. What do you make of this ChromaSpace draft? I'm trying to kind of make heads or tails of it. We have seen Ferocity Grover has been kind of the damage option in these double healer comps. There's also Binary Star Genos. I guess you can opt for that. What do you think about what ChromaSpace are bringing to the table?
I think what ChromaSpace are picking is they're making sure that they can still return to form with their original aggressive composition that they have. I mean, like you still have the Luminary boosted Androxus and the Victor. You got a strong backliner. You got an even stronger flank that we've seen make his way to the ban column multiple times. So, I mean, they have that aggression still. But at the same time, you have that Grover available to him. In the case that Ruckus is going to try and dive in the back line, which I would imagine that he is always going to try to do.
Yeah, good point.
They might even not go for the ferocity. They might even try and go for the deep roots. They might try and make sure that they can't have that aggression as available on the side of mixalazeub. They might want to hold all of their backliners safely. And by all of them, I mean one of them, but he hits like a full team. So you might as well consider him most of the team at that point on the side of Victor.
I think Luminary is just too much to give up. I mean, even regardless of where Binary Star may or may not land, it is deep roots for Ovim here, and then as expected, Luminary for the Genos. I mean, Luminary is just so good still. I don't think you take that away for any extra bit of damage. So an interesting look, Fawn, for game number 2. A chance to keep this ball rolling for ChromaSpace. I think you kind of got the best of both worlds with your healers here in this one. You got Grover for some of that great AoE spatial healing. Whirlwind can help you out. And then you got, of course, the marks, the damage boosts with that Genos. So it's going to be difficult for mixalazeub to work their way through it. Now on this Leon, I think something to prove. Where does Leon stand? Well, first blood on top already as Adium will go down. Immediately traded out, though, as Nepo finds that big grenade. A great start here, maybe for both teams, but it's ChromaSpace with a little bit better space control around the point.
Oriole had so little health, but then it gets healed right back up because that's exactly what we were talking about. We have the double healer. Of course, Victor tosses out the grenade, got one of the first early kills, but then you have situations like this where they're trying to dive to the back line. They want to deal with the Genos, but Nepo is the one that needs to be looked at the most, and it just ends up going wide. They do find the kill, sure, but Adium went down in the very, very beginning on the side of ChromaSpace. That was a little bit questionable. I mean, of course, he was over there with Ovim. That's probably why he thought he had the opportunity. But the minute they found out where Andro was, mixalazeub put a pin in that. They were like, nope, we're not going to let him flank. We're not going to give him any space that he wants to have. And so they immediately killed him. The minute that happened, it seemed like the fight shifted towards mixalazeub.
Well, lots of trades back and forth to start off this game. mixalazeub, though, as you point out, 51% on the point here. So a chance to really lock things down. It's a whirl away defensively from the Xin here. Could be a collapse around the backside from Davazy. Now takes a tumble. Barrage up and over. He realizes The mixalazeub are somewhat grouped up here, but they're able to push their way back out. And now it's a couple of kills on the board as ChromaSpace losing members left and right. They're able to get themselves up to 66%, maybe a little bit higher. How long can Coriol stay alive? That's a big number here to look at. A wall goes up defensively, buys some time, but not enough, as Nauk will track down the kill. Davizy will as well, and no chance mixalazeub get point number 1.
Nepo was free firing that entire time by out in the open, at least by the by Sun, if anything,
right.
Not by the statue, but by the other little small enclosed room that's on Jaguar Falls by the point. I mean, he was able to get those free fire shots in, great, but they weren't able to submit any kills. When Coriol was on point, he was so busy trying to contest that Sosovsky was all the way in the back and ends up getting picked off almost instantly. They just end up affording more space to them because while Nepo was free firing, he was backing up. He didn't want to really fight that in that scenario, but a huge Dread Serpent to try and see if they can start things off.
The Zin keeps finding value. BK's biggest fan is starting to pilot very well. As I say that, Nepo will burst him down effectively. This is where ChromaSpace need to draw that line. It becomes so difficult when this cart is rolling up against you and you have to be fighting out of your own base back down to it. So this is where you expect to see ChromaSpace maybe push out a little bit further, not too far. Jenna's going to put himself right into a spot where he can mark up his targets, provide a little extra healing, but Nauk on the Leon as well, finding some kills. I don't think you realize that there was a ruckus off to the side. Now Davizy finds a big kill as the cart keeps moving forward.
Yeah, as soon as they kill Coriol, like you said, the cart's going to keep on rolling forward. Ruckus was already just waiting right there while the rest of his team, of course, is going to rotate around to try and see if they can provide more support for him because they got that full-on team wipe. But, I mean, I mentioned it before, that's what Ruckus does. Ruckus dives to the back line. Whether he dies or not, he's still being twice as annoying as beforehand. You have to answer him, and you can't ignore him because when you do, you have situations like Sosovsky getting dove on and getting killed instantly, but a beautiful Hexafire to counter things out.
Oh, nearly gets the kill on the Coriol. Nauk will. Adium, though, trades out 1-for-1 here. Cart so close. And it's mixalazeub who are finding the kills here. Down goes Ovin, and in goes the cart, just as convincing as we saw Bright Marsh go. It's now the same, but for mixalazeub this time around, the really everyone, I think, top to bottom, hitting that stride. Only Nepo for ChromaSpace has kind of an attractive slash line here up to this point. So mixalazeub finding that value where they're looking, and maybe most surprising to me up to this point is Nauk on this Leon. We have not seen a lot of Leon, but good damage numbers, top in the game, and good KDA as well.
I don't think it's necessarily due to the fact that, you know, she's bad or anything. I think there's just stronger backliners that you have to worry about dealing with. I mean, we see Cassie a lot of the time to be able to try and counter out a lot of those tanks, and you see that with being the case when they try and fight up against Inara. You see that being the case when they try and fight up against Rom. Cassie is somebody that is considered a lot of the time, and of course you have to answer with Victor and Vivian, right? You can't ignore them as one of the star backliners that are happening to be picked this in this patch. So you can't really ignore them. You have to really try and respect that. But it's good to see Leon just being back. Now, I can't necessarily say in the meta, but seeing her back on some very noticeable teams to let them know that, hey, she's not completely out of the game.
Look at this roundabout by ChromaSpace. Sosovsky around the back with them as well. Barrage isn't going to find much. It's immediately answered back with some healing over from mixalazeub. Adium finds the kill. BK not going to get that one with the spike. Catch though, 63% for mixalazeub. ChromaSpace need to win this one handily, get themselves back onto the point. It's a Dread Serpent in, going to pick up a couple of kills for the blue side. Now it's a double for Coriol, a reanimate use. And Adium stays alive. Down goes Davizy. It's really down to Princess Pecha here to try to counter out 62 to 63% on the point. Neither team with a foothold yet onto the point. And now maybe, but the reinforcements right back in Fawn. This is back and forth. Both teams staying alive.
Rover was on the point the entire time against that Terminus. I think in a situation like that, you just need to back off. You need to group up. Sure, you guys got the kills that you needed. You ended up turning that fight, but now it's turned for nothing because one of your healers is gone. And now you ended up losing one of your point tanks as well. You had the opportunity to be able to try and capitalize on that. Sure, man, you just ended up winning the trade, but at the same time, you still have to make sure that you're grouped up, even if they're gaining percentage for themselves, because this could have been the shoe on the other foot if they had just waited a little bit longer.
Well, this is a big one from Coriol. Seismic Crash will go down. Andy's going to get the kill onto the Zin. So ChromaSpace in a spot now where they could retake 97%. Somebody from mixalazeub's going to have to move forward, but it's not going to be now. He's now back in base and respawning. Adium will kill off Kiesel as well. Suddenly, Princess Pecha left alone, and overtime will be on, and overtime likely will be off here. A good wall is going to separate this fight, and ChromaSpace fight their way back in.
Yeah, through time and space, ends up chunking Ruckus on the side to make sure they actually can't group up over there when he was being dove in the back line with the Zen. They just had to make sure that he couldn't do much of anything. They ended up wiping the Zen out, then they took the Ruckus out as well, thanks to a good through time and space to at least be able to chunk. If it didn't get the kill, they were at least able to capitalize on it, because that's what allowed them that retake off the back of that. But an accursed arm might be pretty huge from Audio.
Yeah, look at that. He's going to do some good damage here. A whirlwind is going to keep a few alive.
Man.
A double for Adium, a double for Nepo, and really it's Keikizo left alive here as the cart continues to roll forward. This is the spot I'm talking about that's so difficult to break out of. If you're already funneled into one of these two outlets from your base, things aren't looking good, but you can kind of work your way out, just as we've seen mixalazeub do here. A few ultimates online. We'll pull out, get a bird's eye view on the rest of this fight here. Bit of a split, playing behind the off tank is now. He slides himself forward, doing some good damage. Shred Serpent sends a few of ChromaSpace running. Corio will stay alive thanks to his wall, but Adium goes down. There's the first damage from now. As Ovim takes a tumble as well. Talk about a coordinated dive. mixalazeub to weather the storm for now.
Yeah, that was just a good Dread Serpent overall. I mean, he noticed, of course, and that's that type of team communication that you need to be able to have, right? Something that you typically don't see in your rank games if you're ever solo queuing, right? You throw the Dread Serpent over there, not when the contact was made, but to ensure that the fight would go their way. When they got that fear, it forced them back. Sure, they didn't get the kill immediately, but they were already in position. Now was able to push up there with Leon. The Ruckus was there as well. Davazi was there to make sure that they both were focusing down those sidelines due to the space that the Dread Serpent was able to create, but the barrage already just turns everything on its head.
That's right, ChromaSpace are going to be able to fight back into this one. Now will fall as well. It's up to these last couple around the side. Pecha will go down. Are you going to use the reanimate here? No, they won't. Maybe wouldn't have been off in time anyway. Talk about a sudden turnaround there. It's looking like mixalazeub are in a perfect spot to defend. And Nepo will find some kills here, now on an 11 streak. 10-4 and 10 on the victor. This game is tied.
Right, and pretty much in terms of loadouts, mostly standard from what it is that I see as well. I mean, I don't really see anything that really stands out to me, but except for Davazi with the proximity, it stands out a little bit because of the fact that, I mean, you would expect him to be able to take that card and make sure that it's at the max level that it can be, to make sure that when he dives, he can live a little bit longer, sustain himself up. He doesn't want to get taken down because he knows how hard Luminary buff is going to hit. He knows how hard Victor might end up melting him and breaking through those shields, even if he doesn't have a record. So he wants to make sure that when he dives, he is forcing people to look at him and not really just pretty much ignoring him, if anything.
Time here for both of these teams to kind of break through, a chance to win the game off of the back of this mid-fight. Funneled back, our ChromaSpace here. mixalazeub on the opposite side, kind of counter rotations here, bit of a carousel on this mid-fight. Both teams will, or mixalazeub rather, will surpass ChromaSpace. What they built up through time and space, dodged out by mixalazeub. There were a couple just in range there, but Corio will send the seismic crash down. They've been locked in. mixalazeub have it at the dash forward. Davazi this time to try to get some damage there, but they haven't seen Nepo, who's got a double kill around the side, reanimate. It's used now, but how staggered out, or mixalazeub around the corner. Goes the accursed arm. Nepo gets another, and Adium will have to. ChromaSpace running away with the third point.
Yeah, and that's what ended up coming down to. I'm glad you used that phrasing, carousel, because that's literally what it was. When they wrapped all the way around, instead of Inara grouping up with them, Corio decided to make sure that he was in a good enough position to throw out the seismic crash. It got the stun. Sure, they didn't push off of it immediately, but all that did was cement Adium to be able to get the first kill that started up that team fight. Whoever else was stunned ends up getting picked off as well. They created the space based off of that alone because mixalazeub ended up grouping things up and really just didn't end up forcing off of the back of that Ruckus that I thought was going to swing behind him. It looked like he wanted to be able to do that, but Davazi just ended up grouping up with his team. He didn't put Hexafire to use like I thought he would have, especially since some of mixalazeub were seemingly trying to push Chroma into that funneled area.
Well, Vaughn, he might have to use the Hexafire here earlier than maybe intended. I guess later than intended at this point, but earlier than intended on the defense if it's forced out here in the next few seconds. A minute and a half to save the game now for mixalazeub after what was a great start to Jaguar Falls. Seismic crash from Corio catches out too. Yeah, there's the Hexafire. You've got Nepo, big target down now in the Victor, and finally Davazi will get taken out. But look at the kills cascading down from the red side. ChromaSpace full on retreat. mixalazeub, hold on.
Yeah, Seismic Crash just ends up getting tossed out and finds a stun, and then it finds the stun on them for 2. But if you don't mind, Chris, can you bring up the items real quick? Because I actually wanted to see something for a second. And yeah, that's exactly what I thought. They have Rezo 3. There are 2 of them that have Rezo 3, but at the most you have, well, actually no, 3 of them that have Rezo 3. Excuse me. Only 2 of them have Rezo 2, but at the same time, when that Seismic Crash got stunned out, they dashed out of the way immediately. Ruckus was already in a good position to utilize that Hexafire when he used it. He was able to make sure he won that one-on-one fight with Nepo because he knew the attention was going to be on the Seismic Crash. And they actually have to back off on the side of this too.
Well, Coriel, Oven both go down. Saving grace there for ChromaSpace. Nepo is going to take Sin with him. Cart's still where it's at, though. Adium getting aggressive there on a Nauk. So at this point, ChromaSpace just need to chill. Thank you, Evan, for reminding us 30 seconds left. I love the announcement pack. ChromaSpace waiting for reinforcements here. Just 15 seconds left. I think a small win for the blue side that you don't get completely swept after the way that one had started. Barrage, a cursed arm, through time and space could be used here. Barrage being looked at through time and space. That's going to snipe down the Sin. A 5 versus 4 advantage for ChromaSpace now. They'll work their way off to the side. A Dread Serpent health bar so low for mixalazeub. Now will go down, and so will Princess Pecha. Davazy gets gunned down by Nepo. It's the reanimate from Princess Pecha right near this point here, and the wall from Corio divides out the fight. BK is going to have to go into the billow rather. Not enough. And ChromaSpace rolls their way through.
Unfortunate, man. I mean, it really just came off of the back of the fight that happened on the right. While the cart was pushing in, you saw Nara and a few of the other members on ChromaSpace that were really just putting a lot of pressure on those sides. When that happened and the cart was still rolling on the entire way, Adium and the rest of them were already pushed in on the left side. They tried to use that Dread Serpent to see if they could stop their push, but it was already too late by then. They had already either forced people back or gotten the kills that they were looking for, and the cart never stopped rolling. He used that Dread Serpent on the side because Anar was already Earth and Guarding. What are you going to do about that? She can't really be CC'd in that situation, so you can't use it on them. You have to see if you can use it defensively, and it didn't get used in the time that you would have expected it to, especially when the cart was rolling so easily forward. No one was really able contesting.
And you talk about how tough it was. You know, we saw this in game 1, I think, and now again in game 2, where mixalazeub had been forced to kind of throw out those ultimates maybe earlier than they would hope on the defensive end. So by the time ChromaSpace regrouped themselves, they have themselves a winning fight. Post-game stats will join us on the screen now. I think Nauk an admirable job on this Leon that we don't see that much of. 118,000 damage, but 122,000 damage for Nepo. Highest streak in the game as well at 18. Victor, still very surprising. He made it down to that 8th and 9th pick, but Nepo made him pay.
I mean, it was just the overall sustainability and survivability that both Genos and you have both the Genos and the Grover were able to provide on Jaguar Falls. Those close together maps in 16-5 and 17, 17 and 11 for Adium. In terms of the KDs, I mean, even Nauk had 14 and 12, but even the Mount Dumba wasn't doing too bad. 2-5 and 25. It just came down to how those fights ended up going. It came down to who was the first one to really go down in those battles. If it was somebody that was prioritized a lot, then that was even better for the opposing team, whether ChromaSpace went down first or mixalazeub did. Whether it was off of the back of the ultimate or not, it just came down to who had the better team fights. And I don't think it was the draft, because the KDs right there were indicative of the fact that they still were playing very well. The KDs weren't that awful.
Yeah, right. They weren't miserable. I mean, I'm never going to be thrilled to die 12 times on Leon, but I'm getting dove on constantly, just a little bit too much to overcome. And I think what we see now, and something to get excited about if you're ChromaSpace or a ChromaSpace fan, is that they've now shown 2 kind of very different mindsets compositionally as far as these games go. They go kind of that pseudo double healer type composition there in game 2, game 1, a little bit more standard on Bright Marsh. And they're making it work. I mean, for, clean game 1, close to clean here in game 2 after a cap and a push by mixalazeub, a chance to win the whole set now in game 3. And Splitstone Quarry is where we'll go. We've seen Strix today, and I think Snipers just kind of jumped to my mind there. We've seen Strix on closer quarters map and a Bright Marsh. I wonder where the Victor, the Leon, the Strix, maybe even a Kness, I wonder where those 4 kind of specifically start to break down here in the picks and bans.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting overall to see how this draft is going to end up playing things out as well. I mean, you have a map that I believe that we're going next to, which is Splitstone Quarry, and
Right.
that's a map that is pretty wide. It's not the biggest map. It's no Shattered Desert. Probably why they ended up banning it, if anything. It's not an obscenely large map,
Right.
but it is a wider one, and we've seen snipers be locked in here. We've seen more backliners locked in than anything because those flanks or those off tanks have to cross a pretty great distance to make sure that they can actually hunker down on the targets that they might be looking for. And there's a lot of different advantages you have by playing on by playing on a split stone and by
Those
playing
sound
on
right.
that high ground. So that's going to be interesting.
Atlas continues to get banned out here. An interesting note to kind of look forward and follow through with. I would be surprised. I mean, look, we had a Victor fall down to what was it, eight or ninth pick last game for ChromaSpace. You know, I'm not necessarily surprised that he made it through the ban phase because we're starting to see that a little bit more often. But the fact that, I mean, I hesitate to say he was prioritized low, but he
Right.
fell pretty far down in that draft phase. So my hunch is that if he makes it through again, the priority will be a little bit higher here for one team or the other. I guess mixalazeub really just rolling the dice that Leon is going to be able to do more than the Victor there. They're just kind of putting their chips in that corner. But that's kind of a bygone from game number one. Victor does make it through again. So Strix, Victor, potentially Kinessa, Leon still on the table. Those are the kind of the long-range damage dealers for this map where my mind goes. Ash, Atlas, both the off tanks taken off the table. So maybe those start to come at a premium. Ruckus, maybe now a very viable pick, and he's seen some success on Splitstone. So maybe wouldn't be surprised if he gets locked in first.
We could even see a Rom end up getting locked in as well. I mean, he's being let loose. He's being let loose too. So, I mean, he might be able to wreak some havoc in the back line. I mean,
Right.
everyone has to look at Rom. You can't ignore him. Same thing for the Ruckus as well. But of course, we mentioned it before. Strix is going to be the first lock in for ChromaSpace and the Andro. So they've already got pretty high damage numbers. Even though the Genos is out of the pool in terms of being able to boost those numbers, you
Right.
still have to deal with some heavy hitters.
And this is a map where I think you start to look at the ability to cater your draft to how you want to play some of these mid fights. And Grover, Inara, Ruckus maybe tells you a little bit more bleacher sided. You want to be able to spread out that healing down on the low ground effectively, play behind those pillars, cut off those lines of sights. Whereas on the other side, you have Corvus, who's going to be able to mark up some of that healing, kind of spread it out evenly amongst the team, send Ramen and Droxus there around the flank, Strixes as well. Two different mindsets, I think, yet again here in the draft. Cassie Kinessa, so we will have a sniper battle at the end of the day, indeed. Do you like mixalazeub and what they've brought to the table here for what could be the final game of the set?
I do actually, because I was thinking about it in my head a little bit about how both of these teams have really drafted their own sort of style. I mean, Mixala's, I'm sure they have the Ruckus as
Ooh,
well, and that's what's interesting more than anything is that seeing an
I'm going to
Eevee,
run at
it's
you.
been a while. It has been a quite some time since we've seen
It's
an
been.
Eevee be locked in the PPC. And that's a very, very go-to pick, if anything. I mean, I feel like for maybe if you need to be able to make sure that Rom doesn't have as tough of a time, because that's what I was about to say.
Right.
You have the Cassie to be able to counter out Rom diving with big game, but you also have that cripple axe on the side of Grover. If Rom tries to escape, he can't. He's going to get crippled immediately. And that's going to make it even harder for him to really move out of any sort of situation. So you want to make sure that you have somebody that not only can dive with you, but
Right.
have a survivability as well. Because if Rom goes down, which I can imagine that he will, then you're going to want somebody, and Adium being on the Eevee, you're going to want somebody like that to make sure that you can keep that pressure on him. Don't let up on a lot of what's happening.
Right.
And she has that ice block. She has the blink to make sure that she has that mobility to make it hard for her to hit and escape if she needs to.
This is kind of the overwhelm you with damage and mobility composition
Right.
from ChromaSpace versus a little extra staying power as far as sustain and health, maybe from mixalazeub. I'm not sure which one honestly works better. Sometimes it just takes those better shots, the overwhelming damage. Once those cauterizes come online, that's when the game starts to shift over towards the other side. How much of this game do you think hinges on Nepo versus Nauk, those two snipers being able to bully one another out?
I think it really hinges on Nepo being able to not only hit his shots, but make sure that ChromaSpace can respond to Ruckus diving on their Strix like he's going to, right? Like that's gonna be, he's gonna have his work cut out for him, especially on a composition where he's playing backline, and it's different where you're drawing a lot of eyes towards people. When you had Rom before and you had Zen and they had to be answered. These people, sure, they can dive in the backline like they are on Knessa, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that the same thing isn't happening on the other side to Strix.
Oriole, he is just
oh my goodness,
run down Nauk back to spawn, and I don't think Nauk wins that engagement. It's the old TKO, but you do have now a Rom that's out of the fight, and that's really your only tank here for ChromaSpace. So how is the rest of this engagement going? Not great, not poorly, but look at the percentage climbing up for mixalazeub, 48%. Davizy mirroring what Coriol does, but finally the kills overwhelming for ChromaSpace. Nauk will trade back one, but it's only Ovim that goes down. You've lost your point tank, you've lost your healer if you're mixalazeub, and that's exactly where ChromaSpace want you, as the red side regains control of the mid.
Yeah, the minute I thought that Ruckus was going to dive into the backline, I mean, he was just underneath them. He was playing a little bit more stalled back, especially since they already had two on the side by fidget spinners. They clearly wanted to move into the backline, but for some reason they didn't hit the gas pedal as hard as ChromaSpace did, and it is paying off in dividends. It is hard for them to respond to this aggression that Ovim has been able to realize, and the Rom Coriol just putting on so much pressure in the backline. They have to respond. Look at how much everybody's back here now.
You know, it is threatening. It is kind of this balance where if you win this mid fight, you can't go too far forward. It looks like just a couple members of ChromaSpace may have done just that. 66% from mixalazeub, as they've now found a couple of kills to kind of turn the tides here. Up to the high ground goes Davizy. 4-man rotation around the right-hand side for ChromaSpace. Half HP. My goodness. And nobody from ChromaSpace can get in range. It's really down to that Rom to juggernaut his way in there. He can't do it. mixalazeub take point number one.
Yeah, the minute that they ended up peeling off to deal with Rom in the backline, to deal with Ovim or whoever it was that was with them, whether it be Audium on the EV or regardless of any of that, the minute that they decided to turn back and deal with them was the minute that the tide started shifting to mixalazeub. They knew what they had to do. They got those kills, and then they were in an even better spot to make sure they could zone out the rest of the members of ChromaSpace or pick off who they needed to. And I guess it really just took them by surprise. I mean, if you clap back that hard and that quickly on the side of mixalazeub, you probably were just surprised they even pushed that aggressively into the back line. But once you deal with it, I mean, it's hard to argue that mixalazeub were ready on the second go around.
Well, this is where you really need to defend if you're ChromaSpace now. A whirlwind forced out, so basically 1-for-1 ult trade there, and Coriol will get melted through by Davizy. Ovim gets the kill onto Nauk, so a small 1-for-1 trade. A little bit better off for ChromaSpace though, so they'll be able to make their way back into the fight quicker. This is where you need to draw that line, and it's absolutely drawn there. Kikiza will go down as well. So you start to charge up some ultimates here if you're ChromaSpace. You're maybe a little bit nervous there for a moment, Fawn, that mixalazeub were able to make up that much ground. But I think this is an important moment to not get overly aggressive. Let's keep the line where it's at and try to dismount them as they move forward.
You definitely want to play a bit slower on the side of ChromaSpace. You don't want to be as aggro as before, just like you were just saying right now. You don't want to push in as hard as possible. You want to find your opportunities, like when Princess Pekka being extremely low, and lead things off of the flashbang. That's exactly the type of things that you want to do, but I don't know what happened to everyone else. Everyone else seems to have backed off now, actually able to get the kills too on the side of mixalazeub.
Oh, big double trade from Ovim though, and that's going to make it a 1 versus 3 on the push. I mean, Corvus won't be able to do much anyway, so the payload's going to move forward nonetheless, but would have been a lot worse if that Androxus hadn't picked up a few kills on the back end of that engagement. Nice shot from Nepo. Down goes Nauk. Senzovsky is going to respawn back from base. Spread out some good healing for the rest of his team here. Forward goes Adium, and away goes Kikiza. 5 seconds remaining, but look at this in the back line. BK, Pecha, they both found a couple of kills here. Into the ice block goes Adium. Blinks up and over. BK will end up going down, but Princess Pecha quite low here. Davizy, he's going to Hexafire down onto Coriol, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to get in range. mixalazeub roll their way through. They're up 2-0.
Very, very well played. I mean, I'm so glad that they were able to actually like fight back on the side of Princess Pekka and, you know, stop banning BK, who still has to pick BK, by the way. They've both been doing extremely well. I mean, they got those picks like you were expecting them to. I can't even really say you were expecting them to get. You weren't expecting them to be able to fight back in a scenario like that. ChromaSpace hit the gas pedal because they thought they had the advantage, but that's exactly the point. They thought, and they thought wrong. Princess Pekka ended up getting the kills as well as Cassie. They got one apiece, and that is very, very interesting to see a veteran. I on the side of Davazy, I mean, that's I can't say anything. I'm trying to look for the words to say something, but
I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time I saw this veteran, and it was sort of, you know, if you're able to make good use of it, it keeps you maybe in the engagement just a little bit longer. We'll have to return to that thought in just a moment here as Davsy will end up picking up the kill. mixalazeub relying heavily on this ruckus, and that's been trust well placed here up to this point. 6th streak now for Davsy, and mixalazeub now will fire down a shot onto Adium, pulls another one over to the blue side of things here. Corio runs his way through here, low health bar onto Pechi. You gotta finish off this kill. He's able to finally barrel stuffer, force her down. Stop ending BK though, is gonna roll his way forward. mixalazeub, small control, but control nonetheless.
Yeah, they end up turning that fight sort of on its head. It seemed like ChromaSpace were going to have a huge accursed arm off of the back of that Androxus, but it didn't end up paying off well because they were already looking at him. Sure, they got out the trade for it. That's a good look, but in the long run, all it did was allow mixalazeub to even push forward even more. When you have a composition as aggressive as ChromaSpace have, you don't really want to lose that many people. You don't want to be down a person because there's not much that anybody else can do. And Corio has just been opening things up in the backline its entirety, but look how low Grover was the entire time. 212 HP. He got dove, but Corio didn't push in.
Ovum wanted it. Ovum didn't get it. K-Kiesel will stay alive here. Adium has to use the ice block. Fires down the shot. Spamming BK, and Cassie will be back in base, respawning. 3 streaks alive for mixalazeub here. ChromaSpace playing aggressively, looking for these targets as Nepo around the backside. He'll go 89% for ChromaSpace on the point. Fighting back in as mixalazeub, not able to do it here. Seismic crash being looked at for Pecha. Double stun, but the Sonar has been forced off the point. You have to go around the corner. Overtime on, overtime reset. So a chance for mixalazeub now to fight back in, but the Inara finally damaged through by ChromaSpace, and it'll be point number 1 on the board for the red side.
Yeah, Ram was holding on to his ultimate pretty much that entire time. Even though there's a quick pause right here, it allows me to go over what happened during that last point fight. Anar was able to touch, sure, grant the overtime in its entirety, but at the same time, Ram was holding on to his ultimate. So he knew what Anar needed to do. She had already eaten so much damage in the long run that as soon as he got on the point, it had to have been at that moment that he needed to touch. And that's exactly when Ram let the Cataclysm loose. They got that kill and they were able to submit what actually happened right there, but a good Ice Storm and an even better Whirlwind on the side of ChromaSpace.
Beautiful Whirlwind there to counter out a lot of what ChromaSpace were looking for. So a chance to tie the game. We've seen this, maybe once or twice in this set already, where one team, notably mixalazeub, pulls out the early 2-0 lead, but then ChromaSpace kind of claw their way back in. So the red side is going to be looking to do just that. Adium has just not been able to play comfortably so far this game. Now, as much dive as there's been on this Kinessa, has done a good job of handling, I think, this Eevee through and through throughout this game. The backline dive just hasn't quite been consistent enough for ChromaSpace. It's tough to find those angles when you have the burst damage of a Kinessa kind of melting you through. Corio will find this flank, though. Look at this from ChromaSpace. They've worked their way in. Ovum will be the sacrificial lamb for ChromaSpace. 1 down to the 2 of mixalazeub. Adium up and over, looking for the final shot, but Nepo's got it instead. Now you've got BK, who's going to combat roll his way defensively there as Corio picks up another kill. Suddenly the snowball building up, moving its way towards the mixalazeub base. They're gonna have to respawn, move their way in. They have no ultimates to defend. Pecha with the last second overtime touch is gonna get in range. Sensovsky is gonna fall as well though. But 45 seconds left here, Fawn. Still a great chance for a capture. I'm sure they saw Ovum in that corner? They did. Okay, Pecha stayed.
Yeah, I was like, they had.
Like, no chance they didn't. And they'll finally get rid of them, so mixalazeub stay alive.
Yeah, they ended up winning the tail end of that fight, just almost barely. You saw how close the cart was. You see it in the progress bar. up there as well. I mean, they rolled the cart in pretty effectively. It just overall came down to how that last fight ended up unfolding. I mean, you had too many people that were looking at Corio and forced him to really not only draw eyes, but at the same time, they were able to pick off a lot of the other squishier targets that are on the side of ChromaSpace. Corio has been doing extremely well with how he's been granting himself a lot of space, but my goodness, there's so much damage on the side of Ruckus that just ends up shredding them apart.
Yeah, Davizy's having himself a brilliant game here. BK not able to get the kill.
Man.
Over on Adium, the card is going to inch its way forward. Davizy off to the side, he has to dash through, and once he goes down, it's all down to K Kiesel. Unless nothing. ChromaSpace roll the card in. We're tied up at 2.
Yeah, that was a good look for them. I mean, I saw on the side that both Eevee and Cassie were engaged in a one-on-one. If Eevee would have lost there, ChromaSpace wouldn't have been able to push in. I just don't think that would have been plausible at all because they would have been down a man. But he lived with barely any HP. I didn't see Adium's health bar was how low he was when he blinked back using the whirlwind. Sure. It seemed like a very, very great engagement on the side of on the side of mixalazeub towards the tail end of that, because they ended up diving in the back. Ruckus got a huge missile barrage in the back line, ended up chunking so many of them, but still they weren't able to find the kills because of the fact that they were just able to force Davizy back. Sure, he chunked out a lot of people, but there were still a lot of people looking at him, and that's just how it ended up working out. It forced him back still, and he couldn't capitalize on that situation. The Inara wall was up just so that she could try and live and see if she could contest the point.
It should be brutal for mixalazeub. Same way that Jaguar's fall started. 2-0 for mixalazeub, immediately answered back by ChromaSpace. Hexafire is going to have to play a big role, as well as the seismic crash. 3 ultimates ready to go for ChromaSpace, Flashbang being one of them. So, depending on where that's placed, maybe a free pick for your side. Juggernaut in through from Corio is going to spread out this fight just a little bit, but stop banning BK. Look how free this Cassie damage is. Nobody looking at him just yet. There's the seismic crash down. That's going to lock down the ROM. And now you're all squishy if you're ChromaSpace. Everyone else has to back themselves off. mixalazeub already on their way to point number 3.
Yeah, and of course Davizy being in a great spot like this means he gets dismounts over the wall and forces ROM to already make it to point, which I don't think he'll even really be able to. He ate so much damage. Eevee is at least able to touch to cause the overtime, but a Hexafire just to melt out Corio almost instantly. The accursed arm is there, but I don't know if that's going to be enough for them to find anything.
Well, Nepo does get the kill onto Davizy. Can somebody else get a touch here? Adium does. Princess Petra goes down. There's a sudden turning of the tides here. It's ChromaSpace have found a way to get some kills. There's a whirlwind left on the backside of the fight, but I think mixalazeub realized that this one isn't going to be winning. Oh, the whirlwind gets triggered. Suddenly, Nepo's got the kill over onto the Grover. Now will answer back. One onto Ovim, he goes, but ChromaSpace, they fought their way back in, and then some. Look at the zoning. Corio is putting forward. Stop banning BK is going to look at him. 4 members corralled by Corio here. Big Juggernaut stunned down from the ROM. He's going to try to run away, but it won't matter. ChromaSpace somehow turn around that mid-fight with a chance to close out the set.
Now he's at least able to find a double on the tail end of things, which is good for him. I mean, because especially how that point fight towards the tail end of that went. I mean, they just were able to force so many people back. Adium was super, super low. He had engaged on the fight. Same thing for Ovum, but that Corvus healing was too strong. Ovum was really the one to look at there because he was so low. He pushed into a full health Cassie and a Grover. Got the shots, but didn't even lower them less than half. He had to back off. Corvus healed him back up, and when Ovum was almost about to die, here comes Adium right around the corner, drops the Ice Storm and puts pressure on him and manages to kill the Cassie. That turned everything on its head. The fact they didn't get that pick onto that Androxus was huge.
Yeah, and that's a really good, I think, fight to study on how these single tank compositions can still turn around a fight. I mean, so often we see it as kind of the death stroke when you know, the pen sweeping across the paper, signing the death certificate when the lone tank goes down. That's a great way of turning it around there for ChromaSpace, and a chance to win the game suddenly with 1 minute and 10 seconds left. A bit of a split engagement. Corio is going to corral the cart forward here. Nepo under the eye of Nauk is going to get shot down a couple of times. Stop banning BK is going to roll himself backwards as well. 55 seconds left here, but look at what Corio's done. He's forced Davizy down onto the low ground. That's an opening pick for ChromaSpace.
Sofsky already with the kill too. I mean, they were at least able to get that last hit, which that's huge, especially since Dabsy was diving so hard to the backline or trying to draw so many eyes, but no one was really able to leave this area that they're in right now. Everyone's been back here for the most part, but Dabsy just pushing up, trying to see if he can get anything, but 68 HP on the Androxus, and he's still not dead. Here comes Choreo running through everything again.
That's what we saw in the mid fight, and it's what we're going to see again here. And Ovim re-engages and gets the kill on to now. It's the same story, different fight. Princess Pecha down to half HP here. Finally, Ovim is dealt with, and it's K-Kiesel this time around, but Choreo moving his way in.
Man.
Seismic Crash gets channeled, but Princess Pecha falls to the double kill of Choreo now. 3 versus 5, full-on engagement for ChromaSpace. Davazy off to the side on his own. I'm not sure anyone from mixalazeub can contest, and they cannot. ChromaSpace turn this one around. They take the 3-0.
I want to talk a little bit about that ROM in that play, because you mentioned something that was very interesting, is the fact that we don't really see a lot of these single tank compositions turn everything on its head in the way that they do.
Right.
And I want to point out the fact that even though it was rough at first in the very, very beginning, like you said, it started off in the same way in Jaguar Falls. It was already a 2-0. mixalazeub had to leave, but they end up getting things turned back around. And that not only is a testament to how good of a team that ChromaSpace is when they work together, but also how much space it was that Choreo was creating towards the tail end of that. Because there were so many times where I was watching Choreo, or at least his outline, all the way in the back line, near spawn, near these areas, and making sure that he was dismounting so many different people. And if he wasn't getting the dismounts, he was drawing attention towards him. And a lot of those times, they had to respond to that, but sometimes they just didn't. In the beginning, sure, they did. But as the match went on, there were so many times where he was in the back line and nobody turned around to deal with him. He just had so much potential.
I agree, and this is a great turnaround for ChromaSpace. That's got to build some momentum, at least mentally, for this squad. You go down 2-0 in back-to-back games, then turn both of them around to complete the 3-0 set. We're going to look at the post-game stats here. Adium had a difficult time, I think, that game. We saw, now and again, Nauk was kind of shutting down the Eevee, but 92,000 damage, I think, doing about as good a job as you could hope on that Eevee, given those circumstances. But Nepo outgunning Nauk by about 5 or so thousand damage, I think very big in that regard. Maybe the KDAs will tell a bit of a story. And what we're really seeing here, Fawn, again, is a somewhat even game KDA-wise. Lots of deaths across the board. But it's that war of attrition that ChromaSpace is able to win.
Yeah, it's the picks when they matter. And even though the KDAs were
important.
close, sure, that's exactly the game it was that we saw. This sort of back and forth, even though that ChromaSpace ends up running away with it towards the tail end of those fights, it still in the long run meant a lot that they weren't able to find those picks at the right time, at the right moment when we were expecting to see them.
Yeah, and I think for mixalazeub here, I mean, tough start to the phase. You've at least gotten yourself a win, so you've kind of gotten that one off your back already. But now it's about consistently kind of turning around some of these picks and bans. I don't think they necessarily got, or some of these games rather, I don't think they got out-pick banned here necessarily today. Maybe to a small factor. I still think letting that Victor through with the 9th or whatever pick it was somewhat interesting there in that one. But I think this is less of a mixalazeub loss and more of a ChromaSpace win, if that makes sense. I mean, it's ChromaSpace that really brought the fire today, and mixalazeub at least something to build on moving forward. Fawn, that's only a quarter of the day here. We've got 3 more sets of great competitive Paladins action. Right up next, we've got Parallax versus Ignite over in Brazil. So ladies and gentlemen, stick around.